shall be holy, for I, the Lord, your God, am holy. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap to the very edges of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. You shall not strip your vineyard bare, or gather the fallen grapes of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the alien. I am the Lord your God. You shall not steal, you shall not deal falsely, you shall not lie to one another, and you shall not swear falsely by my name, profaning the name of your God. I am the Lord.
You shall not defraud your neighbor, you shall not steal, and you shall not keep for yourself the wages of a laborer until morning. You shall not revile the deaf or put a stumbling block before the blind. You shall fear your God. I am the Lord. You shall not render an unjust judgment. You shall not be partial to the poor or defer to the great. With justice you shall judge your neighbor. You shall not go around as a slanderer among your own people. And you shall not profit by the blood of your neighbor. I am the Lord. You shall not hate in your heart any one of your kin. You shall not reprove your neighbor, or you will incur guilt yourself. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against any of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as you love yourself. I am the Lord.
Gospel reading today comes from Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 to 48. Jesus said, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. But if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also the 2nd mile. Give to everyone who begs from you, and do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good. He sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect." Good old Jesus. Be perfect as God is perfect. It's that simple. Thanks for coming. Wouldn't that be nice? Are you serious? I've had people who kind of put you on a high standard, right? Put you on a pedestal and say really nice, flattering things to you, and then you're like, oh man, now I gotta live up to that. Then you got Jesus here. Be perfect as the Father is perfect, and everything will be perfect. He's funny. Well, today I want to do a little bit of discussion rather than me yakking at you for 10 or 15 minutes. So let's look at these passages. These are really, I think at first glance, almost seem like they're kind of divorced from each other, like they're two different texts talking about two different things, and I'll throw it back up there. So you've got this idea that we've been hearing over the past 3 weeks. Jesus is giving the Sermon on the Mount, and remember, again, we said it's probably not one big long sermon or speech that Jesus gave on the mountaintop. Rather, it was a series of sayings that Jesus spoke that Matthew compiled and put together, because to my knowledge, they didn't have bullhorns or microphones or anything back then. I guess the Romans could have built an amphitheater, but I'm not even sure about that. But all these sayings put together, and when you read the first paragraph and the second paragraph, they seem like they're two different things. So let's start with the first one. You've heard that it's said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. If anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also, and if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also the 2nd. Give to everyone who begs from you. Do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you. If anybody want to borrow from you, especially say, oh, I'm a family member, set of tires that cost like $1,200 or... I'm just saying, I've never had that happen before, but... Borrow, right? They're going to borrow it as if they're actually going to give it back. Ever had that? Anybody? Really? Yes. Thank you. Appreciate that. I know it's kind of Texas. Yeah, people want to borrow from us, but they really don't have the intent to give it back. Well, what is Jesus saying about that? And what's difficult about that for us? Yeah. To give more. How ridiculous is that? Really? I mean, we know they're not going to give it back. And he's saying, you know that, and I want you to go ahead and give more anyway. Give more so that you can get less back. What? What kind of a concept is that? In the giving? Yeah, definitely. Right? Mm-hmm. And here's another one is reversals, right? Here's the common wisdom that says, don't give to anybody because you're going to get screwed. Right? But here's the wisdom that I bring you that says, give anyway, even though you know you're not going to give it back or get it back. And like you say, in giving, right? And also there's a transformative property in giving, right? And in knowing that you're giving, despite the fact that you will not receive back. If anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. If anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well. Can you imagine that? Imagine you walked into church this morning and I just kind of decked you across the side of the face. Would you turn and say, oh, you missed the spot? I would. I'd deck you back, just so you know. But he's, what? What is this? Is he serious? If somebody smacks you across the side of the face, give them your other cheek so they can go up the other side of your head? Is he being serious, I think? Is this just hyperbole, or?
It takes the long view.
Okay.
Things will work out eventually.
Uh-huh.
And stuff like this is small compared to the big picture.
Good. So that big picture, we've got the giving. Yeah, definitely.
And you may not get the money back or whatever you have given to somebody, but you get somehow other stuff comes to you. Good stuff. So it works.
Right. Yeah, there is that whole blessings principle, right? You know, might not get back from them, but you will be blessed. So let's go on and talk about enemies. You've heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I say, you love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. So picture your worst enemy. And imagine praying for that person and loving them unconditionally. It's just full of impossible requests. Where do these come from? Love your enemy? Seriously? Well, what is an enemy? I was on the way here and I asked Weston, I said, what's an enemy? And he says, bad guy. Okay. Asked Austin, he says, oh boy. Looked it up online, it says an enemy is somebody who uses violent force against you. That makes sense. But I think they got all those definitions wrong. Think about it. Who's an enemy? Someone opposed to you. Okay, and who determines that?
You, the person being opposed. I subject, so I would keep my enemies.
Completely subjective. You ever drive in, maybe this is a confession moment to do so, it's fine. You ever drive in the car and, just imagine, I know it's completely, You're driving in the car, and there's this car that's just flying up beside you, and you know that he's going for that exit, and you're going for that exit, and you're in this lane, and they're coming, and you know they're going to try to race in there, so you just, might push on the accelerator a little bit when it's time to be slowing down to get to the exit of the lane. Might have happened again. But they're enemy, right? This jerk is going to cut me up and go right in there, right? Now, half the time, they do it. The other half of the time, they just whiz right on by you and you're like, oops, my bad. Right? But it was a matter of perception. You saw that coming and right away, click, enemy. Right? Think of how we have become conditioned psychologically to perceive enemies and to name who our enemies are. Imagine how, since the beginning of human history, how even through evolution, right, our amygdala has become this thing that gives us the whole fight or flight response, right? And we pick one or the other. We either boogie out of there or we go and face our enemy. But I think that Jesus is saying, you decide who your enemy is. You, through your subjectivity and your ideologies that say you are right and they are wrong, create the dichotomy between us and them. And they become the enemies, and to you, or to them, you become the enemy because you just might have actually started the ball rolling first yourself. Almost a self-fulfilling prophecy because you started going against them because you thought they were going to go against you, and because of what you did, they do oppose you, and you get this nasty cycle going with friends and enemies and everything else. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? So he's using tax collectors and Gentiles as kind of like those bad guys, right? The enemies. But did Jesus see them as the enemies? No. No, right? He was the one who was always saying, hey, I'm eating with these tax collectors. You've got nothing on these Gentiles. You've got the law and you don't even follow it. Like the Gentiles, compared to you, they're better. Right? But he's saying, for your sake, your enemies that you call the bad guys, the tax collectors and the Gentiles, well, let me use them as an example for you. And he goes into this. How does that balance out with our perception of who the good guys and the bad guys are? Is it easy just to make a change in your mind? Kind of flip that switch back the way it was, if there was ever such a point when that switch wasn't engaged. And to be able to not look at people as somebody who's competing against me, somebody who's out to get me, somebody who's out to take the capitalist mindset, out to take what is owed to me because it's mine. I deserve it. How many times do you see that on a billboard? You deserve it. And you got this, really expensive Jaguar or whatever. You don't deserve a Jaguar. What are you talking about? How do you deserve something like that? It's not even a matter of deserving, but it's just a matter of talking yourself into thinking that you deserve it, and that those who are against you don't. Okay? You create this bad mindset. We have these tapes that are playing in our head about what other people are doing. I was having my taxes done 2 days ago, and I'm sitting there with them, and I'm first thinking like, I hate this idea. And he gets done with it, and I say, okay, he goes into some more deductions. He says, well, have you got any books or any of this or any of these kind of expenses and deductions? And I'm like, started thinking to myself, so you're going to a separate schedule, so now you can charge me more money, even though I probably already got my deductions maxed. I mean, what kind of a tape is that playing, man? How ridiculous. And then, thanks a lot, I get to this point where I'm like, okay, I'm going to cut you a check. What do I owe you? But I got to go home and get the checkbooks and never carry a checkbook. But I live 5 minutes away, no problem. And he says, no, we're good. And I said, oh, you took it automatically out of my tax return. Sometimes you can do that. But, no, we're good. I'm like, what do you mean we're good? He said, just give me about what makes you feel good. And I'm like, oh, dude, you're killing me. Here I was thinking you're trying to get more money out of me. And you don't even make me pay. Oops. Right? Had the wrong mindset saw the cues, I misread them, and I made a judgment call based on it. And then what happens? Then we have the actions. Right? The hurtful stuff, the words, the actions. You probably heard me say before, when I was living in Japan, going to my father-in-law's Buddhist temple, this priest comes in and he said that a tadpole will naturally become a frog. Okay? But a human being, a human baby, will not naturally become a humane human being without love, respect, kindness, compassion. He says, when you get to a point where you can think of somebody else and the effect you're going to have on them before you utter a word or do an action, that is what it means to be enlightened. That is what it means to be a Buddha. And when I heard that, I'm like, holy cow, that's what Jesus was talking about right here. And I think that is what Jesus is talking about. I think Jesus is saying that we've got these attachments that are unhealthy. We've got these ideologies and these ideas about people that just kind of automatically kick in gear. And so automatically they become the enemies and we become the good guys. But Jesus says, if you were completely detached, if you had faith and trust that you don't have to worry about what your next stuff is going to come from, that you're going to be provided for, and that these things really don't matter as much as you make them matter, and that you're just making yourself suffer as a result of it because you go out and create enemies, right? Because you're competing over the stuff that you don't need in the first place. And he says, they want your cloak, give it to them. They make you walk a mile, walk another mile. Smack you across the face, then give it to you on the other side. If you're completely detached, right, from the thought that these things are wrong or that these things are owed you, then suddenly they stop mattering. And that person who was an enemy is no longer an enemy because you've changed your mindset. If it was us that decided who our enemies were in the first place, we changed how we perceive them, and all of a sudden, there are no more enemies. I'll give you some idea of how we could go about that, because that's not something that can happen like that. Yeah?
Well, when I was I think generally what is painful about prayer is your resistance to it. So often that is actually what makes something seem negative, is because you have this mindset, you're resisting, you're attached to the idea that you don't want it. You actually let go of the resistance, it becomes an experience that you can just, even if it's unpleasant, you can flow through and pass away.
Yeah. Yeah, that idea that although this is a bad thing, I will undergo it because Jesus said it was the right thing. Well, we still got the mindset then that we shouldn't be doing it. Yeah. The Dalai Lama said that we should appreciate our enemies for persecuting us. He said it's one thing for us to go ahead and talk about doing all of these things, but it's only through the actual act of being persecuted that we can actually try them and be formed by them. And in so doing, we become different, quote-unquote, better people. He said, so in that we should appreciate our enemies, because they give us the opportunity to change. It's easily said. Well, you know how it goes.
Local Indians were reported to have had a similar philosophy with respect to their rights. They really appreciated appreciated very similar religions with
Yeah. There's an Indian group I think in New Guinea that have these annuals at the Hunger Games. And they would go and they'd kill each other, and there would be one person who would be deemed to be possessed. And that person would have to be killed. And then the other team, the other tribe or whatever, would be deemed to have the blessing on the other side of this person. They would just keep going back and forth and doing this. But it was accepted. I mean, they didn't hate each other for it. It was like, well, this is what we do. This is our culture, so we don't hate you, but we all have to do this, and that's okay. But I don't get it. But that's fine. Why do I have to get it? It's a different culture. Why do I have to understand everything? Why can't I just come to a point where I say, okay, it's different, and that's fine, period, the end. It's because it's different doesn't mean it's wrong. Just because I understand something doesn't mean it's better. Well, we can get to that point, that middle ground where we say, it doesn't matter if I get it or not. It doesn't matter if it makes me win or not. If it gets me to a position where I don't have to suffer anymore, I don't have to watch my back, I don't have to look out for those enemies who are coming to take my stuff, because there are enemies, because I don't think of them that way. If I don't think of them that way, I don't provoke them to become my enemies. Yes, there are going to be people who are going to do bad things to you, and that's why he says this. Okay, give me your other cheek, because people are going to come and do bad things to you. But be ready for it. Expect it. These are the things that happen. So he says, be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Well, we heard in the Leviticus passage, not only to love your neighbor, but be holy as I am holy. That's the thing about the Bible. You've got the Old Testament in Hebrew, you've got the New Testament in Greek and Aramaic, and then you've got all these translations in the middle. And you've got Jesus saying perfect and Leviticus saying holy. It's a translation issue. He's saying the same thing. Holy means, we think of holy as being this goody two-shoes, pious, doing everything perfectly right. That's not the case. Holy means to be different. Holy means other, set apart, separate from. It's like Jesus is saying again, you have heard it said. The common wisdom says this. The wisdom of God says this. Don't do it just because everybody else is doing it. Be set apart. Be different. Be other. And be complete. Because if we can come to a point where we are thinking about the effect of our actions and our words on those other people, that's completeness. That's completeness. That's when we're there, so to speak. Right? That thing that we're ultimately aiming for. This process of becoming different, becoming holy, becoming perfect, if you want to call it that. Will we ever get there? I don't think so. But that's the point. It's a journey, not a destination. We will never, ever, ever in our lifetimes get there. That doesn't mean that we can't try. That we can't try well.